Okay, I know we still have some folks coming in the room, but we'll go ahead and get kicked off. My name is Megan O'Flynn. I'm an Assistant General Counsel here at ISDA. I'm joined by some of my colleagues who will introduce themselves shortly today. This is the webinar for the FX Market Definitions Survey, Participant Survey, sorry, for the FX definitions. And when we talk about that FX definitions, we're talking about a whole host of documents, not just the 1998 definitions, which are entering their silver anniversary. We're going to buy them a present this year for their 25th anniversary. But before we do kick off, I want to make sure that my colleagues introduce themselves who will also be speaking today. Anne, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. My name is Anne Battle, and I'm a senior counsel at ISDA.
John? Or Mike? Sorry.
Hi, it's Michelangelo De Marzio. I'm a director at ISDA's product team, and I run, amongst other asset classes, also the FX asset class, specifically the FX operations working group. John, over to you.
Hi, I'm John Martin. I'm head of derivative product management team here at ISDA.
So thank you very much. I know we still have some folks filtering in, but I want to make sure we use everyone's time. As it's been noted in the comment box now, you can enter the questions in the Q&A box on the Zoom platform. And for any technical questions, please let our team know as well. So we really appreciate everyone joining today. You likely joined this webinar because last week you got the distribution of our FX market participants survey. We're very excited to launch the survey and to tell you guys a little bit about what we're doing with the survey, as well as other developments in the FX space through ISDA with its membership and in the market. So essentially, I want to give you guys first some overview of sort of the project that we're doing and a little bit of the background of the FX definitions themselves. So, you know, as I mentioned, the FX definitions were originally drafted in 1998, hence the title, the 1998 FX definitions. And though we have had a lot of change in the market since then, and ISDA has, in my view, comprehensively responded to those changes along with the market, the definitions themselves still are from 1998. We'll talk briefly about sort of the structure and the way that they are sort of structured today and the architecture of the definitions today. And part of our survey is looking at what we might do in the future. But as it stands, those are the definitions as they are. So essentially, we sort of over years have had many members and non-members come to us and ask us about, you know, how are we going to reconcile the various things we've done over time? How are we going to work with different market changes that we've seen? Some of those we've been able to address directly through supplements, additional provisions, and other documentation. But because we wish to better understand how they might be best improved and updated, and we want to make sure we have full market input into that process and take it to account both market recent events, things like currencies becoming non-deliverable, and the general evolution of trading since 1998, as well as considering the volume of documentation that now exists as applied to FX transactions and how we might better reconcile those. We did launch this survey that we'll talk about today, and that survey is available online. We are asking that you all consolidate or at a minimum coordinate your firm's responses via the online survey response portal, and we'll accept responses through May 19th, 2023. On the online survey page, you will see at the bottom a Word version of the survey itself. We've provided that in order for you all to preview the questions that we have. We'll go over sort of how that looks today, as well as some of the summary of the survey itself. And that should allow you all, because it's a Word version, to add your comments, coordinate with your colleagues, and the like prior to entering on the online portal, which is sort of a SurveyMonkey page. So in addition to the work that we're doing, we want to make sure that we go through today the survey work itself, the background, the potential outcomes we could have, as well as the other work we're doing in this space with respect to infrastructure and product in this area. So I'll start by talking a little bit about the architecture itself. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So here you'll see, and this is directly from the survey itself. I'm looking at the Word document that you all are able to also look at from the survey webpage. This is the structure of the FX market documentation as it is today. So when people commonly talk about the 1998 FX and currency option definitions as published by ISDA and EMTA, they are mainly speaking about the initial 1998 definitions as well as Annex A. But in reality, they're really talking about much, much more. Since 1998, ISDA and in times in conjunction with EMTA has published a variety of supplements that speak about specific products, and those supplements are applied on a supplement by supplement basis to the transactions, as well as additional provisions that parties can add to their bilateral contracts. Master confirmation agreements and transaction confirmation agreements are extant as well. And there are other product definitions, such as the 2021 interest rate definitions and the ISDA digital asset definitions, that coordinate or can be used in conjunction with the FX definitions for cross-product transactions, or just things where you want to borrow pieces of those definitions for your transaction itself. I will note that with respect to the 2022 barrier event supplement, that's already published, but it's expected to be available electronically via the SWIFT confirmation platform in the fall of 2023. So the SWIFT process is that you submit your full documentation, and then it is implemented across about a 15-month period once approved. So we also have here the FX-related protocols, the multilateral and bilateral amendment agreements, and the EMTA template terms and the EMTA SFEMC terms, template terms as well. So there are, I think many of you on the call may be aware, documents that EMTA and ISDA have published together, including the 1998 definitions as well as specific supplements. EMTA also has their template terms and market documentation guidance documents. This graphic here does not include that market documentation guidance. I'm going to go ahead and screen up here. So this will give you an overview in the survey of the current documentation architecture, which when we talk about it here, as I mentioned, we note where things are published in supplement form. So for example, Article 7, terms relating to barrier transactions, that is published as a supplement. It is not strictly part of the 1998 in time published definitions. But when you read that supplement, it is designated as Article 7 as an addition to the 1998 definitions. However, in order to apply that supplement today, you have to incorporate that supplement specifically into your transaction confirmation, as it is not part of the original 1998 definitions. So this here will give you an overview of the different ways that, or the different documents that are sort of included here. And we wanted to make sure we spelled this out for you guys in the survey itself, so that when you were thinking about the questions and when you are going through the survey itself, you are considering not just strictly the 1998 definitions and Annex A, but all of the different pieces of documentation that exist. To that end, we have published here a guide to the ISDA and EMTA FX documentation and currency provisions and all the related documentation. That was published last week as well, or updated last week. It was published quite a while ago, but we updated that document, and that is available through that link in the survey. So you can go ahead and review that as well. It'll give you more detail on each of the documents in question. So as I mentioned, this diagram here doesn't show all the components that make up market documentation. There are other things such as market guidance documentation and things like that that are not included. Not to say that you can't think about those things when responding to the survey, but we want to make sure that we're sort of being as clear as we can with the kinds of documents we're thinking about when we ask these questions. So I do want to go over real quick, I'll page up. I just want to go over briefly the pieces of the survey so that you all can be familiar with what you're looking at before you jump into it. It is quite lengthy, but we wanted to make sure that we gave an opportunity for people to both speak broadly about their views in terms of how they approach the FX definitions and use them today, as well as their views on things they might want to see changes, or things that ISDA and EMTA should explore with members and with the market. So you can answer as many questions as you like, or as few questions as you like, but obviously, I would emphasize that as I think my colleagues may speak about with the 2021 definitions, this kind of survey in the context of those definitions did form a huge part of where we started investigating the pieces that could change. And so as we'll speak about later, the lessons learned from some of those exercises have led us to make sure that we give as much and a fulsome opportunity for folks in the market to weigh in on the survey as is possible. So just going through the different survey pieces briefly, we have our basic information here. We want to understand who's responding to the survey, what kind of firm you are, and how you engage in the FX market today, and the kinds of transactions that you engage in. we want to ensure that we understand how you interact with the definitions themselves, and how you utilize them in your transactions or in your business if you're not a direct engaging in the transactions themselves. Okay. Here is the background on the architecture that we spoke about before. So this piece is, again, going into current use and how you interact with the FX definitions today. So we want to understand if you think that the FX definitions give you the terms that you need for your transactions in a way that is clear and concise and effective. And if that is not the case in some instances, how do you amend your documentation today? We do give you the opportunity to upload model amendments or playbooks on a confidential basis. These will be anonymized if they are shared at all. However, they are really just for us to understand how things are amended today, so that we can utilize that information to inform the changes that we might consider for the broader market. In this case, in this section, we also talk about things that you may find challenging or problematic or not, and how you might approach those things, and how you incorporate the FX definitions into non-FX or currency option transactions if you do so. Section 2A is about support for goals and changes to the FX definitions. So we want to understand if you broadly are supportive of changes and why or why not your position may be in that case. We would appreciate your feedback on core goals or principles that should guide this type of exercise, and what type of timeline you think would be appropriate for implementing changes. Again, part of why we want to give you guys this Word document is to work through it, is because later on you'll see different architectural approaches that may be the case, and we are asking you about timing there. But in general, we want to understand if timing, if a shorter time frame or a longer time frame is more helpful for folks in the market. Part 2B is where folks can dig in, if you would like, on very, very specific feedback that we've gotten over time from the market as to pieces that they would like to see investigated further. So this is everything from talking about the concept of business day or settlement date, notice of exercise provisions, if we should consolidate and rationalize different additional provisions or supplements, as well as other changes here as well. So you can go through, there's a big long table. Some of these you may not find applicable, in which case you would say that you have no opinion, but hopefully some of these will trigger some of your feedback, as well as other ideas you may have. You're always welcome to add those as well. So we also ask, in that same vein, if you think those types of changes would be more or less difficult to implement. We only have 2 lines on this Word document, but you are unlimited in the response that you have. And you'll see at the end of the survey, if there is not enough room for you to answer, or you have a graphic or something you would like to provide, you're also able to upload that as a supplemental document. So we would ask that you use the survey the survey program tool, but if you do have additional documentation, we'd be happy to receive it. We do have a full section here. We have heard, particularly in the context of the Russia sanctions of last year, that folks would like to look more deeply into disruption events in Article 5. And so we asked specifically about that in a more detailed way. Again, you can answer as many or as few questions as you like in this survey. We also ask about understanding the EMTA template terms and how folks might want to see those things incorporated more fulsomely. As you may be aware, in recent supplements that we have done that deal with non-deliverable and deliverable currencies, we have worked with them to jointly publish supplements, and so we will obviously continue to do that regardless of whether we engage in a broader exercise for the FX definitions. And to that end, we have been working extremely closely with EMTA as well as with GFXD and other trade associations to ensure that we are reaching out to their membership and understanding their concerns and how they might approach this as well. Just wrapping up through the rest of it, I'm going to skip this here because I believe my colleague Anne will be going over the architectural considerations. But to sort of go through, we do have a section on other questions, which is a catch-all for a lot of sort of different things, but it does include whether we should take into specific considerations with respect to market infrastructures, confirmation platforms, clearinghouses, things of that nature, whether there are regional differences that we should consider in this exercise, and any of these sort of general market practices with respect to foreign exchange by the FX Global Code or otherwise that we should take into account. We ask about derivative technology solutions and how those might be best adapted, and as well as the My Library platform, which my colleague Michelangelo will review as well, and how that might be utilized in this context. We are utilizing the My Library platform for the 2021 definitions as well as a lot of other documents, but we want to make sure in this discussion that you understand how that might be implemented here as well. So again, here we say if there's not sufficient room for your responses, you are welcome to provide additional supporting documentation as well. So with that in mind, I want to turn it over to my colleague Anne to review the architectural pieces of the survey and then turn it over to my other colleagues for our other discussion.
Great, thanks, Megan. So going back to part 3. So as Megan said, this survey is looking very broadly at what we could do to improve and update the FX definitions. And we're looking at both the substance, as Megan described, for those of you who are quite active in the FX market. We're looking at how infrastructure uses these definitions, as she also described. And then we're looking at how we could perhaps modernize the structure of these definitions, given all of the changes and additional technology available to us since these were published in 1998. So in part 3, we propose 3 approaches, A, B, and C, and there's variations on all of these, and perhaps some market participants will be inspired by these and want to give us feedback on a variation, and we welcome that. These should not be treated as the only options for this. But at a high level, approach A is no different than what we're doing today. Approach A is basically saying, okay, we need to dig in and perhaps consider, for example, disruption events. So we're going to do that in typical style with a working group in coordination with EMTA as appropriate, and potentially publish a supplement that will form a new article or an amendment of an article to the 1998 definitions, and users can implement that supplement or whatever form it would take on a transaction by transaction basis. So that's no change. Approach B is the complete opposite end of the spectrum. That is a full reorganization and republication of these definitions in natively digital form in My Library, which Michelangelo is going to demonstrate in a few minutes. In this approach, we would rationalize everything. So where Megan described supplements are published as standalone documents that have to be incorporated as such, but essentially form an article to the 98 definitions, we would republish the definitional booklet in digital form with the substance of that supplement actually as an article that flows through with the other articles. In this approach, we could also address any substantive issues that market participants support by adding yet another article or whatever additional format is appropriate. Some of you may be familiar with the work that ISDA did over the past few years to similarly modernize the interest rate definitions. And as noted here, that resulted in what we call the 2021 ISDA interest rate definitions, which are natively digital in My Library. In addition to rationalizing close to 100 supplements to the former 2006 definitions, that republication in 2021 also uses some tools such as the settlement matrix and the floating rate options matrix that make use of the definitions more it makes the definitions more user-friendly. And we could similarly do that with aspects of the FX definitions. And we invite your feedback on what terms in the FX definitions could potentially lend themselves to a matrix that would be easier to digest, particularly for non-lawyers. The other thing I will note about this approach is when we took it for the rates definitions, we had in mind that the terms of these definitions would be easier to digest by a machine, so machine readable. And we would similarly have that objective in mind if we took this approach with the FX definitions. Now, we understand from the best practices Megan mentioned with respect to the rates definitions that this full overhaul is very intense and and it consumes a lot of resources for the market. If we take this, it's very important for us to know what infrastructures would be affected, and we would really need certainty that market participants have the budget and resources and everything else in place to implement this change. And I'll come on to in a minute some of the implications of certain market participants implementing a change and others not. But going quickly down to approach C, which is the third variation we've described in the survey, and that's really a middle ground between A and B. We would rationalize the supplements and the additional provisions. We would look to publish the FX definitions in my library as a natively digital booklet. But in this case, we may not go quite as far. It is possible that certain aspects of the definitions that Megan described with the chart above could stay in their current form, but we would republish the definitions in a way that still picks them up. Basically, what we're looking to do here is take a baby step towards a more modern booklet, but not make as big of a change, not change everything. If there are certain aspects that would be particularly difficult for the market to change or that are working particularly well for the market right now, we would look to keep those as they are and only make certain changes. Now, the variation we've put forward is actually not making any substantive changes, just going to natively digital with that which we can. But we've set a variation on that to perhaps incentivize people to go to that new natively digital form, is that we address some substantive updates as a hook, if you will. And so using the example we've used throughout this webinar, we could make substantive changes to improve disruption events in light of recent events in the market, and we could include that with the new booklet so that people who wanted those terms would be incentivized to move. And then over time, this rationalized natively digital booklet would be much easier to update. And so we could consider additional substantive updates as the market is in a position to adopt them. Now, we've asked questions about the advantages and disadvantages from your perspective of each of these changes. We'd also really appreciate feedback on the different timing that would be required, because as part of what we're considering with respect to an update to the FX definitions is not just the substance. We're considering a full project plan for what the market would need to update these definitions. And then finally, the third thing we'd really appreciate your feedback on is which of these approaches would be best for the types of substantive updates that you support in the other survey questions. So the last thing I'll note is that when we look at implementation, we're looking at when market participants will begin to use whatever, really in the context of approaches B and C, when market participants would start using the new booklet in their new transactions. It is likely, if not certain, that existing non-clear derivatives at that time that incorporate the 98 definitions and whatever supplements are applicable would continue to reference those until they roll off. And so I think that's something that would be really important to consider when responding to these questions. How will it work for your portfolio to have that type of change with certain non-cleared transactions rolling off, because we're going to be considering that. And then we do appreciate that market participants will need to feedback more on that point once they understand the substantive updates, and we'll have to consider whether there will need to be tools to apply those substantive updates to existing non-clear transactions. But I think this is a point that those of you who are familiar with the rates market didn't have to consider as closely because of the larger population of rates derivatives that are cleared, and the CCPs did move their entire portfolio And so there was only a small percentage of the existing non-clear that stayed on the old definitions. In FX, that would be a larger percentage, and that's a point we really need feedback on. So I'll leave it there and turn it back to Megan.
Thanks, Anne. So with this in mind, and I think we mentioned the My Library platform and how we might leverage this platform in the context of the FX definitions, understanding that not everyone has as much familiarity with the My Library platform, we wanted to provide a brief demo and overview of how that functions in the context of FX today and how we would think about it going forward. So I'll turn it over to my colleague Mike to review that.
Thank you, Megan. Let me share my screen. Okay, so you hopefully see the My Library screen. Okay, so since it was mentioned a few times today, and obviously it's alluded to in the survey, we thought it was a good opportunity to give you an overview of My Library in case you don't know what it is. So My Library essentially is ISDA's online platform for its documentation, and users can access it by going onto this URL, isda.org/books/mylibrary, and then at the bottom of the page, they can click here, or simply by going onto this other URL, mylibrary.isda.org/bookstore. And then this is how you see My Library. Another way that users can access My Library is if they went onto the usual bookstore on the ISDA website, and then they picked a document that has the label available on My Library. For example, let's go to the FX definitions. You can see that it's marked on the website as available in My Library. So if you click on it, then clicking on that link will take you straight onto My Library. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the features. First of all, let me mention that what is available today. So you can see that you have FX definitions as well as the ancillary documentation. There's the 2002 master agreement, the inflation definitions, the interest rate definitions as mentioned earlier, the securities financing transaction definitions, the verified carbon credit transaction definitions, then this FML coding schemes, the benchmark supplement, the link to the closed library, and also the digital asset derivatives definitions. So the plan is for ISDA to publish natively new documentation straight onto My Library, whereas there's also a plan to publish legacy documentation, such as, for example, the 1998 FX definitions. For this reason, you see it here, publish and move legacy documentation from the bookstore and make it also available on My Library. So let's start by looking at some of the functions and what are the benefits from a user perspective of utilizing My Library. So to do that, let's look at our most favorite booklet, the 1998 FX definitions. So the first thing that you can notice is that there is a menu on the left-hand side. So this is one of the features of My Library, is to help users with the navigation of the relevant documents. You can see that the articles that Megan mentioned earlier are summarized on the left-hand side, and you can just expand them by clicking on the relevant article number. So let's, for example, look at Article 3, for example. You can just click on, for example, section 3.7, and that comes up right away on your screen. So effectively, a user doesn't need to flick through the pages of the physical document. You can just click there, and automatically that takes you to the relevant section that you're interested in. What a user will also notice is that some of the terms are hyperlinked. So what is the advantage of that? Well, if you click on any term that is hyperlinked, that gives you a pop-up window comes up with the actual definition of it. So again, that avoids having to flick through the pages of the document. You can just click on the term and the definition will come up. So if you're thinking about how you would do it In the old days, you'd have to probably flick through the document. Maybe you forget what page you were on, and then use your train of thought, whereas this allows you to see straight away the definition of a term. Another important feature I'd like to show you is the bookmark. So when you open a term that is hyperlinked, you get an icon here, which you can click on, and then you get an option. You get an option to bookmark or to add to my collections. Let's go through my bookmark first. You can add a new bookmark. For example, I want to call this non-deliverable settlement. Let's call it that. Okay. Then confirm. What that did, that created a bookmark within the book. So effectively, you are saving as bookmark, as if you were highlighting the physical document of a piece of information of terms that you are interested in and that you want to keep as reference for later. What other things you can do? Let's just say you wanted to do a similar thing, but you wanted to do it across different books, then you add a new collection. For example, if you wanted to, save down non-deliverable payouts across different books, you can create a collection, obviously, call it non-deliverable payout, and that will create a collection that sits across all the different books. So for example, you could do the same for the barrier supplement with respect to non-deliverable payout or other piece of documentation, and that will save it down in my library. Another feature I wanted to show you is the fact that you can still download the document if you wanted to. So by going into any document, you've got this icon here, download, and then you click on it, and then that allows you to download the document to your local folder, and then you can see it here, and then you can print it using the print button. Another important feature I wanted to show you as well is the ability that my library gives user in terms of comparing versions. So as you saw, option B and option C that we went through in the survey talk about digitizing the book, but also the fact that it's digitized also brings the ability to potentially do modifications to it, and they can be versioned. So similar to how the 2029 definitions are deployed in my library, and they've been updated pretty much quarterly since 2021. So to give you an overview of the version function, I'm going to show you Annex A. So Annex A, as you very well know, has been amended and restated in November 2017. So for the purposes of my library, that is version 1. The latest version is V9, which you can see in the top banner, published on the 23rd of February, sorry, 2022. So by clicking on this icon with the 3 dots, here on your left-hand side, you can see by expanding all the different versions that have been published since that V1 that I mentioned earlier from November 2017. So you can click on any of them, and then you can see the actual publication that was done at the time. You can see here a compare button. So if I click on it, it shows you now V4, because I was on V4 just before I clicked that button. So V4 automatically becomes the base version, but I can change that. I want V9 to be the base version, the current one. And then by comparing, so let's just say I wanted to compare it with V2 published on the 1st of April, 2018. I just clicked on a random one. You can see that automatically my library shows you the black line between V9 and V2. So a user can scroll and actually look at all the changes, or more effectively, they can go through each deletion or addition one by one if they wanted to as well. And this will just automatically go down each time there's a change. So you can see in this example, the Venezuelan Bolivar was changed, the West African CFA franc was changed. So it's an effective way to see changes. Another important feature is the fact that let's just say you wanted to change base version to be V2 and V9 to be the compare version. You can just click on the switch button here, and automatically the two versions will switch, and the other one will become the base and the other will be the compare. Another feature that is quite nice to have in my library is the dual view. So this effectively will show you the two versions side by side, black line still, but on the side, so you can actually go through each one of them without having the text being black line on top of each other. So it could be probably easier to read if there was a lot of black line. So that is probably one of the coolest features that we have in my library. I wanted to show you also another one to conclude, which is how users can also see additional resources that may be stored for a particular document. So for this example, I'm going to go to the May 2022 variant supplement, and by clicking on this icon down here, you can see resources that have been stored that are available for users to view and to download. For example, in this case, the FAQs document that show you some questions about the variant supplement. So this information is available to users. Some typical type of information that will be stored apart from FAQs would be for a supplement, for example, be exhibits. So just to give you an example of one that is stored, exhibit 2 is available here, and users can look at it and print it as required. And that concludes the overview I wanted to give you today. Hopefully that was useful. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you very much, Mike. Hopefully this was helpful for folks to get an overview of how the My Library platform works and conceptualize when they're answering the survey, how they might think about it being implemented in the forward-looking view of how we might address changes and updates to the FX definitions. As I mentioned, and I think others have mentioned earlier, we did, in doing this activity, take into account the lessons learned, as it were, the things that we have done right and things that we might want to do differently as versus the 2021 definitions exercise. So I want to turn it over to my colleague John Martin right now to go through that, as well as to tell us a little bit about the other things we're doing in the FX market with respect to infrastructure in order to understand the market better and help users in the market.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so we have got experience of updating a major ISDA definitions booklet, very recently, the 2021 definitions that was implemented by the market in October of 2021. So that was a huge project. And obviously there's a lot of lessons learned from that project. Some of the lessons for things that actually worked really well, as Megan went through with you, running a survey prior to starting the work really gave us good insight of some of the problems that firms were having with the 2006 definitions, and some of the things that was really due for an improvement, such as the cash settlement methods, the floating rate option design, the fact that the architecture, how that was built, the fact that it needed to be supplemented every time that you made changes. So that really gave us a good insight as to how to really start the project and what to focus on. And there was also some really good things that happened in that we set up an infrastructure working group with all the key infrastructures in the interest rate market to help work out how to actually implement the definitions into the market. But obviously, you know, with any project, there was things that we learned that we could have maybe done better. And one of the things that we perhaps could have done better was really engage with more of maybe the smaller infrastructure firms earlier on in the process. And you know, one of the lessons that did come out of the 2021 project was that certain changes that we make in the definitions can actually have quite a significant indirect impact on some market infrastructures, even if they haven't, you know, they don't actually directly reference the definitions in their systems. You know, they may use certain aspects of the definitions and not even realize they're using it. An example of that is the floating rate option code, similar to FX, the settlement rate options. We changed the way that the codes were designed, and that had knock-on effects on some market infrastructure firms and caused them significant implementation builds. And some of the smaller infrastructure firms we hadn't been engaged with throughout until later on in the project, and that ended up sort of slowing down the implementation for some market participants. So really, that was one of the big lessons that we learned, that we really need to, right from the start, engage with as many of the infrastructure firms as we can, and engage with them throughout the whole project, allow them to, you know, even complete the survey if they want to, and just, you know, build up a map of what infrastructures are involved in that asset class, all the lists of all the different infrastructure firms within each of the categories that we identify, such as trade execution, you know, clearing, settlement, compression, etc. And then, you know, build up a list of all the firms, and so that we can engage with them through that whole process. And that's really what we're doing now. Me and my colleagues, Mickey and my colleague Michelle Hurd, we're really, and Kathy McFadden, who's just started in our New York office, we're working to really build up a picture of the market infrastructure in the FX market, identify all the key firms, and as many firms as we can, so that we can ensure that they're at least kept informed of what we're doing throughout the whole process, so that, you know, if we look to change something that is going to cause them problems, they can actually, you know, hold their hand up and get involved in that discussion. And also, hopefully, that will help us work out a realistic time frame for implementing any changes that we make, because we will have all the relevant infrastructures that could be impacted by that will have a say in that. So that's what we're doing. And to be honest, one of the things that has come to light initially is just how complex the FX market is compared to interest rate derivatives. And, you know, just looking at the trade execution section of it, you know, you have electronic brokers, voice brokers, many multi-bank platforms, single bank platforms, liquidity aggregators, etc. So you've got a lot of different types of firms in that trade execution portion of things, and from what I've seen so far, a lot larger number of firms than in the interest rate market. So I think it's even more important for this project that we really build up that picture of all the different firms in the FX market, and so that we can engage them through that whole process. So if we haven't already, we'll probably be reaching out to a lot of you that are participating in this webinar to go through with you. And please, you know, if we haven't got some of the infrastructures that you use in the FX market, you know, please let us know, and we'll reach out to those and involve them in the process. So I think that's all I really wanted to say, Megan. So maybe now turn back to you.
Yeah. So
people to ask some questions.
Yeah, if folks have questions, I think just want to remind everyone you can use the Q&A chat section to ask those questions. So ahead of closing, and if people do have questions, I just want to share really quickly, this is the landing page that you should have received the link to where the survey is located. If you have any trouble finding it, you can always reach out to myself or to anyone you know at ISDA. Will direct you to the right place. But to the extent you did not get the email invitation, please do let us know if something was forwarded to you for the webinar et cetera. Happy to provide you the information that you need to be able to answer this. So on the survey landing page, as we noted, we have here sort of the overview of what we're looking to do here, as well as attach the paper version of the survey that we've reviewed here. The online survey tool link is here, and so when you click into that, you will be launched into the actual online survey itself. So we've provided this page and the document in full form so that you can take a look at that and consider your answers and consolidate them with your organization ahead of submitting them. To the extent that we can have a single or just a few consolidated or coordinated responses, we would appreciate that. So we're getting a full firm view from your firms. To the extent that you are answering the survey and portions are not applicable to you, or you are focusing in on infrastructure or other pieces, as I mentioned earlier, you can answer as many or as few questions as you like. And we also do have a lot of options here for no opinion or NA. So we want to make sure that people have as much flexibility as possible. However, should you have any other questions, you can reach out to any of us, as I said, by visiting the ISDA website or reaching out to any of your contacts at ISDA. We'll direct you to the right place. So it's not looking like we have any questions. If anyone does have any, please do reach out to us at any time. Again, the survey response deadline is May 19th, and we look forward to hearing from you about the survey. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today, and we look forward to hearing from you all in your survey responses and utilizing them to plan how we will best address the FX definitions going forward in the market. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.